When we were younger, we'd spend years trying to become adults. Then one day you wake up and realise no one actually told you what being an adult would feel like. Nobody talks about the friendships that disappear, the changing priorities, the boredom, the purpose, the body changes, or why your tolerance for nonsense suddenly just drops through the floor. So today, that's what I wanted to talk about. What nobody warned you about midlife. Now, one of the most important things throughout our lives are the relationships that we build, not only with our partners, but also with our friends. And that's probably one of the biggest things that takes time to maintain as you get older, especially midlife. So that's the question is, does maintaining friendships get harder as you get older? And why is that? Obviously, the biggest thing is time. I think in order to maintain friendships, you need to invest time in them. And that's not always about seeing each other. That's also about just staying in touch, staying in contact, whether that be once a week, once a month, or once or twice a year. I think it's how you stay in contact with people is important, and the frequency of that is dictated by the friendship and how that friendship has survived over the years. There's certain people that in my life I may only speak to once every couple of years, but I know that I can go out with them and pretty much pick off where we've left off. But as you go into love-based relationships with partners, that can sometimes change you as a person as well for the better. And that can also at the same time divide your loyalties, because if you're with a partner that doesn't get on with one of your friends, then that can make that friendship a lot more difficult to maintain, because you can be put in a position where you've got to make a choice sometimes over, do I back up my wife, my girlfriend, or my husband, or my boyfriend, or do I back my friend? Because sometimes those situations are difficult to stay out of. So even with that, investing time in people when there's a lack of time in our lives because they're so busy with work, and we'll come to that later on in this episode. You have to prioritize what is important, what is going to take your time. Obviously, we've got our immediate family, so if you've got young children, all your time rightfully is going to go into them, and they're at the top of your priority list, along with the relationship that you're in. And as we know, and we spoke about on the pod, relationships can be a roller coaster of up and down, where you can be coming out of relationships, going out of relationships, sustaining your current relationship. And that in itself takes an enormous amount of time and effort to maintain relationships so they flourish and grow, and so that you're prioritizing each other. Then outside of that, if you've got kids, you're doing all the things that we all do with kids, and it's hard enough with one, then it's multiplied with two, and again with three, etc., etc. So finding time for the person that you're with is very difficult anyway, and then maintaining that outside becomes even harder. Now, a lot of the time, what we tend to do is, we do everything together, so it ticks all of the boxes. So we then start meeting up with our friends and their partners. And then when you have kids, you start doing that, because that way you're spending time with your partner, with your kids, and with your friends. And that becomes sustainable and really enjoyable, because you can do holidays and all those different things, the nights out, the dinner parties, where you're all in a very similar situation. So you understand it. But then as you grow and as you get older, those dynamics change, because kids get older, obviously, and then they start to do their own things. And then you have to pick up your friendships. And I think generally our tolerance for everything as we gets older, it reduces and diminishes. And we we start to be a lot more selective about what we're choosing to spend our time in terms of what's in it for us here, and that's with friendships as well. Now, we always get problems with family. I myself are in a family that's extremely broken. There's fragments left, right, and centre, and it is really sad, but that's how a lot of families are. The difference with families is you can stop talking to them, but they're always related to you. With friends, you don't have to put up with a lot of stuff that you probably would do from families. So with brothers and sisters, you can fall out and you may not speak for months or years, but there's always a chance that that will be rekindled because they're always going to be your brother and sister. You can choose whether other people are going to be your friends or not. And you can get to that point where you're like, do you know what? This relationship is not serving anyone anymore. There's nothing in here for anyone. And then you just choose not to see those people. And they can be tough decisions sometimes because these may be people that have been in your life for a long time. But it does come to a stage where friendships become about quality, not quantity. So when you've got a little amount of time, you're then choosing, what you exactly want to do with it. And you may play a role in a friend's life that you may not be able to play anymore. It may be that you're the single friend, or you're the friend that everyone goes to when they need someone to hang out with. And when your situation changes, that can then change the dynamics of your relationship, which understandably may not suit the other person. And they can be like, do you know what? You was always there for me, but you're not now. But to you, it's like, I was there for you when it suited you. That was kind of a bit of that was a one-way street that suited you. And that was fine for me at the time, but it doesn't work for me now because I've now got other obligations or other things in my life that I want to pursue. And that's when friendships can become fragmented. I think also when we have partners, that changes things a lot because you may have a partner that maybe doesn't see eye to eye with one of your friends, or your friend doesn't see eye to eye with your partner. And then you're placed in a position where, it's like, where are your loyalties going to lie? And understandably, most loyalties will always lie with the things that are closest to you. So your wife, your husband, your kids, whatever it may be, and then you'll always back them up first because that's what you need to do. But that can become a problem for relationships, and sometimes it is just easier just going, let's just cut ties. We're not serving any purpose here for each other. Let's just cut ties and we'll both move on because it just makes it easier for everyone. Who knows? In the future, you might pick things up, but as we get older, things change very, very quickly, and time moves so fast as you get older as well. And I always remember hearing older people say that when I was younger. Time just goes, and I think it's always been that way. But as you get older, you're just aware of not only is time moving faster, that you're also moving faster and faster towards your final destination, which all sounds a bit, morbid, but hey, that's kind of the truth. When I spoke to Anna Mathens before about these uncomfortable truths that are in our life, and that is one of them. It's going to end at some stage. It's going to end, hopefully later rather than sooner. But the further you go down your life, I know now myself. I'm a lot closer to the end than I am to the beginning. So you always have that, and you think, if time is finite, then I want to choose my time with people that give something back to me. And we all value different things in friendships, don't we? And if someone's not representing those values for you, then they become decisions that you have to make about how much time you're spending. And I think that's the key essence to friendships. It's about time that you choose to spend. And it's so easy to lose contact with people I've in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, definitely, I've tried to maintain. I look back and I've thought about people in my life that have always been there when I've needed them. Not people in my life that have always been there, but like those people that I know when things have got tough, they've been around. And they may only have been in my life briefly in the past, but I know that I've been able to count on them. So I respect the friendship with them a lot more. And it may be people that I hardly ever speak to, but I have tried to make a conscious effort with those people to actually, when I think about it, just send them a message and just check they're okay. Say, listen, we do need to meet up soon, which is one of those messages that, you need to follow up on because it's so easy just to say that. And before you know it, everything changes. But it's just about keeping in contact with people. And when you look back to your 20s, especially if, you had lots of different circles of friends because of your hobbies, interests, whatever it may be. So I was really fortunate when I was growing up. I had lots of different circles of friends, mostly through playing football and, working at different places as well. So I was always bouncing about friendship groups and made some really good friends that I wouldn't see for a long time and then I'd see again. So sometimes you'll have a wide mixture of friends where other people will always have sort of a very tight knit of friends. And we all know the expressions that, that you can count your good friends on one hand. And I am now, as I get older, I understand there is a difference between friendships as well. I know I've got people in my life that I would call friends, but I know that I'm a friend when it suits them. It doesn't work both ways. And then you decide whether that's okay or not. Those people that are like leaves, let's say, from the expression that that they're going to blossom once a year and then they may fall away and you won't see them again for a few months and then you'll see them a lot, and that's usually when it suits them. It's not always when it suits you. And then the decision for you is, are these people that add something to my life when they're in it? And if they do for a short time, then that's great, but they're probably not people that when things are at a stage where you need to talk to someone, you're going to be able to rely on them because they're going to be like, yeah, I'll come back to you as soon as I can. And you know that you're never going to hear them again and from them again. And we've all got those people in our life. So as we get older in midlife, I think friendships are a major part of it. That you find that people that you used to be really close to, you've fallen away from. And you do make different friends, I think, when you're older. And I don't think it gets harder to make friends when you're older. I just think we're a lot more selective about the people. And just like we are with partners, we recognize attributes in people that are loyalty, let's say, or reliability that we hone in on. And you'll be able to make friends with people quite quickly, although you might not be a lot of those people, because you recognize those traits that reflect your values as well. And they may not always match up, and you might be in people's life where your morals don't match up to them and they won't consider you one of their close friends. So as ever with these things, everything just works both ways. But I don't think we get less social with age. I just think we become more selective. Another big thing in midlife that you start to do, I feel, is you start looking at purpose. And what happens when you've achieved all the things that you wanted to, start looking, think, what now, and am I happy? And I think that depends on the times that you grew up in. For me, it was, you were always looking to get the house, get the car, get the girl. They were the things that were embedded into you. It's like, in order to be successful, you need to have a big house and a nice car, and you'll have the beautiful wife and the beautiful kids and all those things. But I'm glad that the younger generation, when I speak to my sons, that's not the case with him at all. They don't want bricks and mortar. They see that as lost revenue. That they're about renting. It's about that's somewhere where I'm there for the moment. I'm not there forever. But you tend to pour a lot of time into these houses, making them nice and moving houses, and you get to a stage where it's like, right, I've done this. So what now? What am I doing with this now? Do I sell it? And then if I sell it, where am I going with it? And then what am I going to do with that money? Because if it just sits in a bank, that's not going to do anything for me. And then if I start spending it, it probably won't last that long because in the overall reality, it's not a great deal of money. So you then have to decide, what you're going to do with that. So all of this is about purpose, and it can be with career as well. you know, I still enjoy my job, but I do look now thinking, you know, where is it, where has it gone and what have I done? I hope that I've had an effect on a lot of young people's lives in a positive way. I'm sure I haven't always got it right, but these are the things that we start to question as we get older and wonder what we've been doing with all these years. For me, I didn't really move up in terms of my job. A lot out of choice because I didn't want the extra responsibility, but a lot was out of I actually enjoyed the bit that I was doing as well. So you start questioning career, you start, house, and you know, as we said before about friendships, and you wonder what the purpose of it all is. What are we doing with it? What's the end goal here? Is there an end goal where I want to get to? I was with speaking to a friend recently who's you know just suddenly started to travel an enormous amount because he's in a fortunate position where he's been able to. But he made a conscious decision. He was like, I'm going to enjoy my money while I'm still at an age where, he's sort of late 50s, where I can still get about and, things that I can get upstairs and downstairs easily. And I don't want to wait till I'm 70, 80, where I can't get off and do things because I can't get up these stairs. And it takes me 20 minutes to sort of to take two steps further or travel 2 meters. So you do start questioning that as you get older, all these questions in your life that you start to think, right, what now? And sometimes it's referred to as a midlife crisis, but I don't think it's a midlife crisis. It's just sometimes we question our purpose. What has this been for? Was there ever a plan with all of this, or was I kind of winging it and seeing where it would go all the time? I think for me, of someone that was single, there's always that excitement still in your life, and then if when you enter into a relationship later on, you've still got that excitement in front of you. So you've still got this journey left in front of you. I think for people that have been in relationships for a long time, they may be getting to this point of questioning purpose together or with each other because their kids now have all moved out and got older and moved on. And it's like, okay, so what's our purpose now? And they may have a plan. You may have a plan if you're one of those people, but it could also be that you're those people that look at each other now and go, okay, so what now? And then there becomes more difficult conversations ahead, maybe. And then we get to boredom, you know, and it is, are people just bored or are they just exhausted? Because it is that constant routine of up every day, brushing my teeth, I'm at work again. And then before you know it, you're brushing your teeth again, you're going to bed, and it's trying to fit things in. And especially now, I don't know about you guys, but the winter I find such a struggle now. And I don't ever remember finding it a struggle. I used to think, great, winter, early dark nights, and I like that because, out and about and the change in winter fashion, like roll necks, big coats, that was great. And, nights in round the fire. But as I've got older, I have found the winter's a real struggle and it's the daylight. I find now that my life in the summertime, these summertime hours, you get home from work and you still feel like you've got time and a bit of energy to do something. So I can still go to the gym at 7 o'clock and I'll be in the gym and it's still light outside. And And when I'm coming out of the gym, it's still light. It's like 8:30. And you're thinking, right, okay, this is good. It's still light. You don't feel like it's bedtime already. Where when you're doing that in the winter, I come out, and I don't think it's the same for you guys. I come out and think, oh, just need time to bed. Get home, have my dinner, go to bed. And it seems like the night's over. And that's why I think you start to question more things of where you are in life in terms of where your base is at. And that's why, especially me as I've got older, looking around now thinking, do I want to live somewhere with a better climate? Where I know it's going to be summer when it's summer, and the evenings are lighter, and even when it's cold, it's only 18, 19 degrees, and it's still good sunlight. I'm going to see the sun at some point in the day, even in winter. I'm not going to go weeks on end with the clouds covering the sun so I don't see daylight. So I think that can produce a boredom and just constant grind in your life, especially those winter times, as I said. And then there's the responsibilities that become heavy because, especially for family people as well, you've always got this, well, I've got to go to work because I've got 3 kids and I've got to maintain this and I've got to carry on for that. And I know these conversations that I've had with my friends that, they're constantly striving for that next holiday. And in the meantime, it's almost like, okay, so what am I doing here? If I'm just getting through the week to hit a weekend, I'm wishing away 5 days of my life here, and this is adding up, as I'm getting older, these days are adding up, and I see it in guys that are in their 30s and their 40s as well, where it's like, right, let's get to the weekend and just have a massive blowout. Let's just go mad. And it's like Monday, back to the grind again, getting through the week to get to that Friday to have a massive blowout again. And I think that's fine when you're doing it and you're in it. But as you get older, you start to sort of look at that and go, right, I'm wishing away days of my life here that I'm not getting back. As each one of these passes, these are not coming back to me. So I want to feel like I'm doing something with every day of it. And I always remember speaking to a guy that I know in a bar a few years back now, and he was sort of early 60s. He'd done very well for himself, and I was asking about what he's doing, and he was saying, I'm selling everything up, and I'm going to do this. And I was like, well, that's a big decision. And he said to me, well, listen, Elliot, the way that I look at it, I've probably got 10 good summers left. So I want to make sure that every summer I'm doing something that means a lot. And I was like, bloody hell. And it really struck a chord with me. And then no matter where you are in life, if you think, right, okay, so let's say we all get to sort of mid 80s, I could only have like 25, 30 summers left, or whatever age you may be doing it from. And it's like, so I've got to make each one of these count. Because when you start getting down to that single figures, like he was talking, you're like, blimey, if he's only thinking he's got sort of 8 or 9 good summers left, once one of those goes, that's not coming back again. So I think this all comes from questioning where you are. And I don't think a lot of people are unhappy. I just think maybe they're unstimulated and there's no sort of plan of where they're going. Now, the big thing as we get older as well is the body changes, the things that happen to our bodies. Now, this has always been a big thing for women, obviously. And as we know, the rise of surgery, Botox, and now that, like, these jabs that everybody seems to be on. And I've got mixed feelings about those. I think they're great for some people. I think for others, they're an answer to laziness. But, I don't know if there's the research out there to know the long-term effects from them, but just how your body changes. And for me, as someone that still loves their sport and still plays, football every week and paddle or tennis or whatever it may be, and I'm still out running and gymming all the time, it's the constant injuries. And it's sort of like every day you get up and you think, that didn't hurt yesterday. Where's that come from? I don't remember that hurting. No, and it's like you then sort of going on to ChatGPT and sort of finding out, what this may be. And then you're sort of satisfying that, okay, there's nothing life threatening, but, I need to do all these rehab. And then I'm finding that, when you go to the gym, I'm doing more rehab bloody exercises than I'm doing actually exercises to move me forward in the first place. And when you go to bed at night and you're looking at the mirror, sort of where your sort of nipple line used to be up here, it's sort of now gradually dropping down there. And then you think, right, well, I need to do more exercises in my chest because I need to get that up. And, you then start noticing that your skin's maybe not as tight as it used to be. And, it sort of drops a little bit more than in places where it probably shouldn't. And then you're coming home from work and you're noticing that, you may need to sort of rest your eyes, as my mum used to say, for sort of like 25, 30 minutes before you then go out. And it's bizarre really that something is always hurting, and then you're trying to fix something, or then looking at what supplements you need to take, and your supplement cupboard gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it sort of looks like a section of boots where you're taking so many tablets in the morning. You start thinking, I probably need to set my alarm earlier because now I'm taking creatine, vitamin D, cod liver oil, all these things. And then before you know it, you're spending sort of £200 a month on supplements, just trying to sort of feel something like you used to. And then the biggest thing for me, the biggest sign is, when I go out running, I see younger guys now, and I used to be able to run. I used to be a decent runner. And I see these guys where their legs just go round so effortlessly. And I think to myself, my legs used to do that. And then I look down at my legs, and then I'm just aware that they don't even look like they're moving anymore. And it's taken me longer and longer to get past sort of cars in traffic jams where I used to sort of think, yeah, I'm moving faster than you are now. And that just doesn't happen anymore. And you'll see someone run past you that's running slow, and you think, hold on a minute, they're overtaking me, and I think they're running slow. So what speed am I going at that they're overtaking me? And all these things with our bodies sort of are a sign that, time's moving on quickly, and you're trying to find the latest thing to sort of revert that back. And all my friends now, we're all in this paddle group together, because we've jumped on that bandwagon as you do. And it's starting to get sort of right. Well, I'm injured, so I can't do this. And yeah, well, my elbow's hurting. I need to give that a couple of days. And my knee's hurting. And it's all these things that happen. And the WhatsApp group is just a constant barrage of people getting injured. And it's the same with my football team. We all play vets football. And for those people that are playing vets football, or got people involved in vets football, it's just a constant stream of injuries basically throughout the game of people. It's like, how long can you last? How many players are actually going to be left on the pitch? And all these body changes, you then hear of people that are having these odd surgeries done, and whether these are acceptable now. And as for someone that can't stand surgery, absolutely hate it. So I'm adverse to any sort of pain tolerance whatsoever. I stay away from it. That's just not an option for me to do. I know it is for a lot of people, and that's great for them. But it unless it's something that I have to have through sort of hospital, then at the moment for me, it's just a no. And at 20, you seem to bounce. Where I think at 45s we start to creak and crack, don't we? There's a big difference. And the next thing we come to is tolerance. And our tolerance in midlife just disappears, and we get less and less tolerant of so many things. And I think that's a real dangerous thing. I listen to my mum now, and her tolerance for things where she used to be very open-minded about is seems to be like rapidly going, and at times it could be construed as other things that you think that's not a nice trait. But I notice it now that I'm far less tolerant of people. I think I'm far less tolerant of of rudeness. And I think that's grown. And I've never been a fan of that, but that just really annoys me now. And also, sort of, I think when you see these young lads now, some of the behaviour and the young girls, and my biggest thing with tolerance at the moment is one is the bloody bikes that drive around everywhere and make you nearly crash 4 or 5 times a day because they never bloody signal anywhere. They cut you up left, right, and centre, and they're on mopeds, so they've not bloody passed any tests at all. They're all on licence plates, but they're zipping in and zipping out. And I get it, guys. I know you're working and you're earning a living. You're trying to get to the next thing, but you have some road sense, because there are times where you just think you're going to get hurt. You're going to get hurt, and that's going to be someone else's fault when it's actually not, because you're driving like a bloody idiot. So slow yourself down. And there's hundreds of them. They're all cutting across like red arrows in front of you and going round roundabouts the wrong way and not waiting where they're supposed to wait because they don't feel like they need to. And that drives me nuts. And then the other thing is and it's always young lads, is the slow walkers across the road. And don't get me wrong, there are times when I do cross the road and I know there's a car coming, and I'll always say thank you. Just my hand up, say, sorry, mate, yeah, appreciate that, letting me go. I know you've had to slow down. A bit of respectful. But it's these lads that sort of wander across with their big bowl and sort of stone in their shoe with that limp. And like, they do it like, they own the road, and you just think, mate, seriously, just say thank you that the fact I've had to slow down. Don't walk across the road in a way of, yeah, you slowed down for me. That really does my bloody head in. You do think, like, in your head, you're just driving at 90 miles an hour and not stopping. And it's just freaking rude. And that really, that's when I think, God, I'm getting older. That's really annoying me now. And I would never have been like that at that age. I think the one thing that we had when we were younger, to a certain degree, was always a little bit of respect. Not everyone. There was always that sort of demographic of all of our friends at school where you thought, they shouldn't do that. Whatever it was, you always had a few mates that were like that. But now it just seems to be general. It seems to be more people are like that, and the demographic of people that are polite and well mannered is a lot less. It seems to have shifted, where there's sort of like this bloody entitlement to what they can and can't do because they can put on a balaclava and not be recognised and think they're sort of fighting the system, where you just think, guys, you're ruining what's going to come around and bite you in the arse eventually anyway. And then that whole thing of tolerance of, I don't get, and I never have done really, but pointless arguments of you get far less tolerant. And this goes back to the original, what we opened with about friendships. And this is why I think friendships are harder to maintain, because you can sort of tolerate the pointless arguments when you're younger with your friends. But as you get older, you just kind of think, you know what, I don't need this. I don't need to be justifying how I feel anymore to you or to whoever it may be. So I'm not going to do it. And then that kind of resolves it, because you just think, I'm not having these arguments anymore. I don't need to. I no longer need anyone else to sort of justify how I feel for me. I can do that myself. I'm fully capable of, knowing what I want to do and knowing why I want to do it. I don't want to argue with you whether it's right or wrong, because that's what I'm going to do. And the only people that you're willing to do that with are the people who are usually in the same house as you, because you're living with them and you've got to maintain a sort of status quo with them. And you don't become grumpy. You just get protective of your own values and of your own peace, really, and sanity. And then we move on to the next thing, which is our priorities as we get older. That changes massively. And I say our priorities, and here's a question: do our priorities change, or do we just become honest? Do we just sort of think, I'm just going to be honest with people now, because I'll be honest, I don't care if they like what I've got to say or not. And we tend to choose the easiest route for ourselves over excitement sometimes. The big time over money issue is a very big thing, and I do think people can choose time over money when they've got the money. I don't think everyone has got the luxury of choosing money over time, because it depends on what financial state you're in. So I think for some people, everyone would like to choose time over money. I just don't think we're all in a position to do it. And relationships over status, of how people see you and where you stand in your relationship, and what role you're now playing in your relationship. You may no longer be the husband. You may now be the granddad, the grandmother, the sort of the only brother left. And that's another big thing as we get older with our priorities. And I'm still lucky enough to have one of my parents here. And I always think now, once I haven't got that, you know, like Zach, for instance, has only got me and his mum, and like, who's he got if we go? And you want to make sure that they're okay if anything happens to you now. And so all those priorities that you never used to think about suddenly change, because you start to look at the end game, if you like, of thinking, right, I want to know that they're great if I'm not there. And they're very sort of emotional subjects to actually start thinking about, where you think, I don't want to leave them on their own, because that's a horrible thought to think. I don't want to not be here for them. And your priority starts to be not so much about you as such, as it probably more was in your 20s. Your priorities were about yourself. Your priorities change for other people, I think, in midlife. And the older I get, the less interested I am in impressing people anymore. I know the stuff I like to wear, and I've got a certain style, I guess, as we get older. And I notice this when I go to football. I always see the young guys having a little snigger at maybe what I'm wearing. And I just think, do you know what? It's taken me a long time to get comfortable with what I'm wearing. And I used to be like you, where I'd wear the stuff that was acceptable to everyone else. And now I'm going to wear the stuff that I like. So if it's got a bit of a retro feel to it, and retro's not maybe in at the moment, I don't care. I like what it is, and I like the way I look. So you get comfort in being your own person, where I think even in your 30s, I think you're kind of looking a bit, still searching, you're still not quite sure who you are, and you're still finding that out. So I think it gets less about impressing people as you get older, and more about being comfortable in your own skin and knowing what you're about. And maybe that's the lesson that we learn of midlife. Not that life gets worse. Maybe you just start seeing more clearly what matters and what doesn't in your life. And more importantly, who matters and who doesn't matter in your life. Anyway, guys, I hope you've enjoyed today. Make sure you subscribe and follow, because that really does help us with engaging people and moving this show forward. Because, the feedback that we get is always great, but I really do appreciate you make sure you subscribe and you follow and you like anything that we put out on all the posts, and spread the word to your friends to give it a listen, and always give me feedback, good or bad. It's always welcome. And I just thank you again for following and subscribing to 50 Shades in Grey with me, Elliott Davidson. And I will catch up with you soon. Take care. Goodbye.